nationwide problem, and it's been brought on by, I mean, the federal government, the USDA, the government, federal government has passed laws and regulations that have just kind of enabled these corporate farms and just allowed these types of things to go on. And then, like you said, it's such a nationwide problem, and we're spending tax dollars. You know, they've done it to keep our food cheap and to make it available for the millions of people that live in this country. But is it really cheap when we're having legislation, we have problems with our water that increases treatment costs and so forth? So I guess my question is, do you hope that should you win this lawsuit, that it will create changes within our USDA and how what they allow corporations to feed and do, and I mean...
Yeah, I'm first and foremost hopeful that it will create changes in industrial practices.
Right.
Whether the industry changes voluntarily in order to avoid lawsuits like Oklahoma, or whether they change because of congressional legislation. That's what I primarily want. The day of being able to surface apply poultry waste without much regard for the environment, I think are numbered. I hope are numbered. I pray are numbered. And I think it's going to start in Oklahoma and go to the other states. I don't want to cast the federal government as a villain here. When these laws passed back in the 1970s, agriculture was different. And they were primarily concerned about point source pollution. They were concerned about, and I'm going to forget the name of the river, but it was a tributary of the Ohio that caught on fire because of pollution of the water. This was back in the 70s, and it gave the impetus for the Clean Water Act, which was the beginning of CERCLA and RCRA and the other acts that we deal with. Nobody thought agriculture was a problem. You know, it was municipal discharges, and it was industrial plants that had pipes that were discharging directly into the water. That's what the problem was, and that's what these laws were designed to address. Well, we've got a handle on that. We've got a pretty good handle on municipal discharges and industrial discharges. But we don't have a handle on what the agricultural industry has evolved into, where we're no longer talking about family farms, a few head of cattle and some chickens and a wheat ranch. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about huge factory farms that ought to be subject to the same rules as any corporation. And you name them, ConocoPhillips plays by one set of rules and Tyson plays by another. And that's wrong. And that's what we need to fix. But we are using federal statutes to reach that. Both the hazardous waste and the solid waste laws that we think are broad enough to cover this application. We have to prove to the court that particularly the phosphorus that's being put down is not being put down as fertilizer, that it's simply being eliminated as waste. It's being disposed of because they don't have anything else to do with it. And particularly as to the poultry companies, because they contract with growers, and it's the grower's responsibility to dispose of the waste, the farmer's responsibility to dispose of the waste. But as to the industry, which supplies the birds and supplies the feed, to them, they have no use for that litter at all. So categorically, when it hits the floor of the barn, it's waste to Tyson. And it's solid waste under the Act. And it needs to be disposed of properly, and that's where they're failing. The birds never belong to the farmer. They are delivered to the farmer as chicks, and when the farmer finishes raising them, they're taken back by Tyson, and the farmer is compensated on the basis of the total weight. So it is really a tenant farming kind of operation. Tyson determines what the house will look like, the temperature of the house, the water source, the feed that they get, the medicine that they get. Every aspect of the growing is controlled by Tyson, And then they put in the contract, but you're responsible for safe disposal of the chicken litter. And that's just wrong. We've said it's wrong, and so far the courts have agreed with us. The only exception to that is if the bird dies. If the bird dies, then it becomes the property of the farmer. And it's his obligation to properly dispose of the dead bird. But the live birds at all times belong to the company. One of the lawyers was arguing that this isn't our poultry litter, it belongs to the farmer under the contract, and the judge interrupted him, said, now wait a minute, these are your birds? I said, yeah. I said, then they're eating the feed that you supply? I said, yes. Well, how can you say that what comes out the other end doesn't belong to you? Yes, sir.
I have kind of two questions that are related. The first is, you mentioned how much money we're dealing with as far as the net annual profits of Tyson or these industries. We're in litigation, they're spending money on attorneys. And I guess my question is, how much would it cost to fix this? And is it actually fixable? Can the Illinois River be clear again? Can Lake Tinkiller be an attraction to scuba dive in again?
That's a very good question. Yes, it's all fixable, and part of it is going to depend on time. The human health problem is fixable in a matter of months. If surface application of waste stops, then with a relatively short period of time the water's safer, and within a year our experts say it will be as if poultry litter had never been applied. So that's the bacteria, that's the E. coli, that's fixable quickly. In terms of the environmental damage, the growth of the plant life inside the river, if you stop application to the extent that it runs off, if you stop putting down more than the plants can take up, and this is where I wish Clay were here, and when he comes back be sure to ask him. One of the things that the Conservation Commission and the conservation agencies are doing is purchasing conservation easements, and where they pay the farmer money not to plant this strip that's closest to the river, or closest to the bar ditch, or closest to the stream that flows into the river. And those conservation easements, where they've been tried, have a real impact on cutting down on the transmission of chemicals into the water. So that's something